All right, Rabbi Aklepi, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We are so honored to have you as one of the major faith leaders of South Florida. Of course, Rabbi at Temple Beth, and one of our trusted dialogue partners for Jewish-Muslim dialogue. So uh, you have so many leadership roles that you play, I think, within the community. So we wanted to learn a little bit more about you, your background, and kind of what brought you to this position of leadership eventually here in the Jewish community.
Wow, that's a many years,
right?
many years question. But to make it brief, I would say, well, I'm a rabbi, part of the Reform movement, part of the liberal denominations within Judaism. I was raised in a synagogue that was similar to where I am now, and it was somewhat different than today because it was open politically, and it was just a place where people could learn about their Judaism and become more involved, and different from what maybe the older generation then had experienced, because many people had come from a more traditional aspect, and this was a more interpretive understanding of observance and practice, and even some of ideals. So, and then I did the kinds of things which build Jewish leaders. I went to a Jewish overnight summer camp, which is created really just for somewhat for those purposes. And when I went to university, I went to Brandeis University, which at that time had a majority of Jewish population, and it was created because Jews were excluded from other universities, and so this university was created in 1948. And so I was also surrounded there by an environment which made, like in camp, like at home, about being Jewish as being something that was really positive, life-affirming, community-affirming, and the ideas of we become better people by following the tenets and the laws and serving God and serving others. And so it just fit with who I was, and I really liked it. So I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the only one who's a rabbi. My parents weren't religious per se, and they weren't really even observant. I became the most observant of the family. Now my siblings have really come back more. And then I went to, after undergrad, then I decided to become a rabbi and went through a 5-year rabbinic program and ended up in my first full-time rabbi job, the director of the Hillel Jewish Student Center at the University of Miami. And that's what brought me down to South Florida, and I was able to stay in South Florida and move to a number of different positions. Now one of the rabbis at Temple Beth. So I think that Judaism did and does afford me an opportunity to grow spiritually, grow as a person who's social minded, grow as somebody who's connected to the divine, right? Connected to God, and to think about how God wants me to live. And it makes me be better and do better. So that's my sort of religious component. As an undergrad, I studied Near Eastern and Judaic studies, so that was the Near East and Jewish life as well. So that's what brought me, I think, to this position and to this life that I've been living for 62 years now, I can say, and raising my children in the same way.
What are the core values of Judaism for you?
The core values of Judaism would be to love God, to love your neighbor, to do mitzvot, which are Jewish obligations. Some are positive, and some are to do things, and some are the not to do, or other words, commandments. To recognize that the world is a very big world, and that we are part of it, and that there's a mission involved in Judaism, really, to make the world a better place. And I would say, also, I would say for most Jews, a connection to the ancient homeland in Israel and the state of Israel.
Okay. Before we get to Israel, one of the aspects of Jewish theology that's important is this idea of Tikkun Olam. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, that's what I meant by social justice. So Tikkun Olam is a Hebrew phrase which means to repair the world. And if we look at many of the mitzvot and the commandments of the Torah, they are all about repairing the world. So last week we read, be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Simple things like, don't hold a laborer's wages until the next day.
Right.
I always joke that when my kids were little, if I would have a babysitter, and in those days we didn't Venmo people, you had to use cash. If I didn't have cash, I'm like, oh, I'm going to give you the money tomorrow. That's totally against the law. You can't do that. Leave the corners of your field for those who are hungry.
Right.
And so that means feed people who are hungry. Don't place stumbling blocks before the blind, and don't curse the deaf. Don't take advantage of people who are vulnerable in society. So those are really some of the ideas of Tikkun Olam. It's a social justice idea, how to protect those who are weaker. And if we look at the whole reason for Torah, right? It makes individual better, but how do you do that? The whole role of Torah is really to protect the powerless.
Okay.
And so the idea of marriage, which is for us today, we would look like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But it protected women who are powerless, right? We don't oppress the stranger or the widow or the child. We read approximately 36 times. They are the ones who didn't have any power. And so many of the laws of Torah and so much of Tikkun Olam is how do you protect those who are powerless? And as an extension of that, how do you make sure that people have their own individual power and voice?
Okay. Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, it's a very beautiful way of thinking about sort of your mission in the world and kind of, what you're trying to accomplish. I think you were saying that you are the first person in your family, or you were the only person in your family to become a rabbi, and kind of seems like you were the most observant out of a lot of your family. Was there a moment that changed you as you look back to say, okay, well, this was something that happened that really, got me much more interested in it?
I really need to say that my path was really an evolution shaped by my community.
Okay.
So there wasn't really one point, except that as a child, I didn't know any women rabbis.
Right.
Right? Because they didn't exist.
Right.
So I didn't know a woman rabbi probably personally till I was in high school.
Okay.
So before that, it would never occur to me.
Right.
Although I do know some women who always thought they wanted to be rabbis, even though they knew women weren't allowed to be rabbis. That didn't occur to me,
Right.
and I just didn't think about it. And as I was in college, and I was involved in Jewish movements on campus and religious things and Zionist things, and I had a conversation with the rabbi who I grew up with, and he was like, well, what are you going to do when you graduate?
Right.
It's a typical conversation.
Sure.
I have that conversation all the time. You probably have that here
Sure.
on campus all the time. And I said, well, I don't know, graduate school, maybe I'll do, there was a degree in New York that was a Jewish education degree and social work degree. And he was like, well, as long as you're going to do that, why don't you think about going to rabbinic school? Because you have aspects of that work, and it may be a better lifestyle. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. So that could have been like the point where I first initially started to think about it. And then I actually read the letters I would get from this reform movement. Recruitment letters, come to a weekend and learn about the graduate programs we have.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh, okay, these two make sense. I'll do it.
Okay.
And so that's really what happened. But it wasn't sort of like any divine thing that happened. It was more of okay, so I'm thinking about my future career. What's the best way I can be true to how I want to live and what I enjoy doing? It was that kind.
Yeah. So so being a female rabbi is something that exists in the Reform tradition
and the conservative
and
tradition,
the conservative tradition,
and now what we call the Reconstructionist tradition. And sometimes the movements are a little bit more fluid, so
Right.
there are others. But yes,
Okay.
non-orthodoxy, non-traditional. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So, but from my understanding, your rabbinic credentials would not be accepted in Israel then. Is that right?
So this is how it works.
Okay.
There is a progressive, what we call reform. Other parts of the world will use the word progressive movement in Israel.
Okay.
And there are reform women rabbis in Israel.
Okay.
And like in many parts of the world,
Uh-huh.
like in Europe,
Right.
Religion is state funded. Unlike the United States,
Right.
religion is state funded.
Exactly. Right.
So, in terms of getting funding or recognized by the state, not so much.
Okay.
For example, officiating at a wedding, which is a legal document,
Right.
The same as a traditional rabbi, not really.
Okay.
That would not happen.
Okay.
So it is different, and you
Mhm.
don't have the same, I would say, availability. You don't have the same privileges
Mhm.
as traditional rabbis. That is an ongoing struggle that the liberal and progressive movement has in Israel.
In Israel, yeah. No, it's very interesting because I think that it echoes kind of also within Christianity as well, that there was these questions mid 20th century in terms of women sort of being ordained, and you see that in the Episcopal tradition, other
Right.
traditions. You definitely don't have that in the Islamic tradition at this point.
Right. So, like the way I understand it, or the way that I envision it,
Yeah.
like I do care and it's important,
Right.
but there are certain things, like there's certain legal things that could change, right? In Israel,
Right.
that there could be, and there have been many rulings for the Supreme Court that ruled in favor of a case brought by the progressive or reform movement. So state can do that.
Right.
But in terms of someone's own religious thinking of
Right.
what someone who's traditional will think, and even among tradition, it's a spectrum. So not everybody along tradition.
Sure.
There are plenty of people who will claim themselves as observant or orthodox who totally accept reform as a different way of
Right.
doing things. But I don't really get involved so much as people I know who observe a certain way, and I know that the way they observe doesn't really have a place for me as a Jewish officiant, as a
Right.
rabbi. I don't care.
Okay.
Because I'm not really going in that world. When I go into that world, I'm a visitor. I'm a Jewish person. I'm not going to have that fight because it doesn't matter. I operate in a different world.
Right. Sure.
So, yeah, that's and again, when I explain Judaism is really almost Judaism. There's a big spectrum of belief
Right.
and practice and what one person says. Even among the Orthodox, there is if somebody has a specific question, the question is ask your rabbi. There's not a central authority
Right.
like the Catholic Church.
Right.
So once there isn't a central authority, there is interpretation.
Sure.
No matter what stream of the faith, no matter how observant or traditional you are, if there isn't a central authority, there is interpretation.
So the majority of American Jews are Reform. Is that right?
The majority of the largest number of affiliated Jews in the United States would affiliate with Reform Judaism.
Uh-huh.
There are plenty of people who just call themselves Jews, or again, so the Pew Research Center does some studies on this.
Sure.
And it is, so yes, but then there are the people who don't answer.
Okay. I mean, one of the advantages I think you have as kind of as a Jewish leader, and then connected kind of to not just the larger Reform movement, but then so the Jewish community worldwide, is you can have a different perspective. You can kind of zoom in and zoom out a little bit. Where is the American Jewish community today?
In terms of what?
Just in terms of their vitality, their perspective on sort of the religious life that is here, the political life of being American. Where do you see American Jews?
Yeah, so I can't even I wouldn't even be able to answer because there isn't one. I can't say the American Jewish community believes X or believes Y.
Okay.
In terms of American politics, in terms of the future of Jews in America, I think that the only thing I may say is people are worried about antisemitism today, where I never had that growing up, and my children didn't have that, and they've just experienced it recently. Okay. So except for that, I can't speak like the American Jewish community believes X or believes Y.
Right. Okay. So what about you personally?
What do I think?
Yeah, what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I think that America is a great place to be Jewish. Mm-hmm. If I could pick any other place in the world, it would be next to Israel, but for different reasons than I would pick America. So it's not the same litmus test. America gives us the most freedoms, the most protections, the most broad way of living as a Jew. Mm-hmm. And so that's all great. And I think that the community, there are a number of articles written that the golden age of American Jewry seems to be ending, right? Where there was real access and growth. And I don't necessarily believe that's true, because I still believe that we have the mobility needed, and I think we have the education still available to us. And yes, there is anti-Semitism. There's a very funny sort of joke, and I don't have the whole thing, but can you imagine telling somebody 100 years ago or 150 years ago that there were protests against Jews on college campuses, and the person you're speaking to from Poland would say, "You mean Jews are allowed to go to college?" Right. So in those cases, in that instance, we don't want it bad, we want it better. So I am still a believer that America is still a wonderful place to be Jewish. Nothing's perfect, and we still need to make sure that we do have safety, and we do have a community to be a part of, and not to feel like isolated, but to feel like we have done in the last 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, a part of a community, not separate from the American community. Okay. There is a feeling now of being more isolated and on the outside. I mean, we took the first 150 years of 200 years of this country to try to feel a part of, right. And I think we did for a long time, and now there is a feeling of maybe not being a part of it. Okay.
So talk to me about what does Israel mean to you?
Okay. So Israel, going back to biblical times, has been the origin story of the Jewish people. And when I visit Israel, and you see you see something that was built in King David's time, right? And you see all of these places that have gone back to biblical times, and you feel the stones, and you see it, so historically and religiously, we've always had, from our prayers and the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 586 before the Common Era, there's always been a constant returning, and people always being in Israel. So Israel's always a spiritual homeland. And since the beginning of Zionism in the 1800s, when other national movements began to create for a feeling of nationality, then I also believe it's a political place too. So those two things are very much intertwined. I would say if I could say something else about the American Jewish community, to most American Jews, there is this commitment and feeling that it's not a separate part. It may not be a primary residence, or even a place that maybe you've only visited once, but it's not completely separate either. And what's interesting is in our Jewish-Muslim dialogue and other interfaith dialogue, I think that's the hardest idea that I have to express to people.
Okay.
It's something, and it's something that I was first surprised that like people didn't get, especially people who are immigrants from other countries. Right. So, like for example, there's a large Jewish population that came from Arab countries, from Morocco, Tunisia, Iran, Iraq, and that was the Yemen even, and that was their the place where they lived for hundreds of years, and yet they had another soul that was in Israel.
Right.
And so that they were able to be a part of both societies. So the idea of this kinship, and I think that's really a good way to describe it, because it's not only historical, and it's not something that was only post-Holocaust, that it's a place that came post-Holocaust for the safety of the Jews, although that's when it ended up to be. It's always been a part of Jewish life, and I would say it feels more like a kinship than anything else, and it really is still hard to express. And I think for many years we didn't have to explain it, and maybe now more people are asking about that.
Okay. How
maybe it's a feeling also, like,
Sure.
and this is it doesn't work for all Jews because not all Jews have gone to
Sure.
Israel, but Miami is one of the cities with the largest proportion of Jews who have visited Israel in the country.
Okay.
There is a difference in feeling like you're among the majority and you don't have to explain who you are.
Okay.
Instead of being 2%, and you have to explain to most people you meet who you are, what you feel like, what you eat, what you believe, how you dress. And so I think that feeling is a feeling of family and closeness, and it's good to feel sometimes you're in the majority.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I think it's very different, I think, because in you have a lot more Muslims in the world as a whole. And as much as Mecca and Medina are sacred, and the society is important, it's a spiritual center rather than the constitutive of all of Islam. And so I think it's a very different sort of relationship, I think, that Muslims have towards Mecca and Medina and sort of the land of Saudi Arabia. But we can definitely understand, sort of the spiritual significance within Judaism. The interfaith work that you do, why is it important?
It's important because we all live together.
Sure.
And it's better to understand people and be close to them than not understand them. And I think our world is better for it when we are able to understand people. We're able to hear sometimes their perspectives or even what's important to them. Right? And different faiths hold different beliefs, and different things are important, and different practices are important, and different ways of seeing the world. So, I do work with people who are converting into Judaism. And when I speak to them and they're first trying to explore, some people come from a religious faith, some people don't. I'm like, well, religion is really different ways to articulate a relationship with God.
Right.
So Judaism is one way to articulate a relationship with God. And I think, and I believe that's true. Now that's on a religious level, but Judaism is also a kind of peoplehood, which I think is a little different than Islam, because Islam has different ethno-religious groups within it.
Right, exactly.
They're Africans and Southeast Asians and Arabs. It's not all and Persians.
Exactly.
So and Jews, even though they have different, somewhat ethno-religious groups, it's so much smaller
Right.
that is a closer connection to a people. Though Jews from Morocco are very different from Jews from Poland in
Right.
their origins,
Of course, yeah.
but now it's blended together.
Right.
So religion is a way to articulate a relationship with God, and that's a little bit different than peoplehood. And from the day I got to Miami, I've loved living in Miami.
Okay.
I just love it.
That's amazing.
And even though I lived in the Northeast, which is pretty diverse, maybe because it's the warm weather, I don't know, the cultural diversity in Miami brings a warmth and a flavor and a way of, I think, more trying to have people participate in somebody else's cultural religious life than in other places. And that's completely anecdotal. It may have nothing to do with anything, but I feel like in Miami, there's more of an invitation to participate in how somebody else lives.
No, I definitely agree with that, yeah.
And I think that's makes this town better. It makes it more understanding. It makes it closer to each other. It makes kids go to school better together. Again, not perfect. I am speaking somewhat ideally. So I think that those are like the practical reasons why I do interfaith work. And of course, Judaism was never a proselytizing religion.
Right.
So Jews were always forced to convert to other religions, but never looked to have people join them. And so in that way, traditionally, we were somewhat afraid of mixing with others because others wanted you to believe like they believe. But I think we've reached a point where we don't have to be so worried about that. We can say no if we don't want to, and we can embrace other people's differences and ways of doing things and see how it adds to the richness of the mosaic, tapestry, whatever you want to call this city that we live in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's something that's been, even for me, I think that working with Temple Beth and kind of the Jewish community, you don't have that the challenge. I mean, of wanting to be feeling that someone is trying to convert you either, and I think that's a big challenge, particularly for when you do interfaith work, especially with like kind of the evangelical community and stuff like that, the Christian community. There is this not necessarily explicit, but there is this implicit, desire for, to see sort of Christ and sort of, as a savior. But I think overall it's been, I'm very excited about, where we're headed in terms of, as the discussions get deeper and sort of more theologically sort of nuanced, and also we're able to talk about the political, sort of challenges of Palestine and Israel, and how the conflict hopefully is gearing towards, sort of a more peaceful resolution, or at least as much as...
Well, I think theology is a lot easier to discuss.
Definitely.
Than the real world. Jews have always lived among others and always lived among Muslims. And there were times that were better and times that were less good in traditionally Muslim countries. So I don't think that is so much of an issue the way one sees how God wants them to live.
Right.
But I think if one sees that if one's faith wants another faith, again, to live differently or believe differently or live in a certain place and not another place, I think that's where, that's where the discrepancies and the difficulties come in. But how one believes, and certainly for Jews, how somebody else believes, it's okay. Live and let live according to that. And I think also the experience I have in the times that I've lived in Israel, and the university where I studied in Israel, where it was a real mixing of cultures. And yes, neighborhoods were mostly different, but not completely. That it was more Miami-like, that people were able to live together. Not believe necessarily the same things, But in the big picture of what do people want from their life, they want to be safe, they want to be productive,
Sure.
they want to raise families. I mean, those very basic instincts
Right.
of humanity that,
Right.
that people have, I think that is shared among many people. I recently we haven't seen that, but I believe that for many people it is shared, and I think that's what I feel like is good to build on. That's why we always eat when we have.
Agreed.
That's
Absolutely.
why we always eat when we come together.
Exactly correct. Any final message that you want to give to our listeners?
Okay. I would say that if you're a person of faith, no matter what faith, it's good to get out there and see how other people live. It may not resonate with you at all. It may even say, oh, I don't care for that. I really like what I do better. But it does let you see that there's more than one way to go through this life. It's almost like the way that people choose different careers.
Right.
Right? And you would say, oh, my parents only wanted me to be an engineer.
Right.
And if I'm not an engineer, I certainly can't be an artist. But then you see, oh my goodness, there are paths for people,
Right.
so many different paths. And I think that if we can acknowledge other people's paths and find what is good in them and what's honest and built with integrity, then we can help make this world a better place.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Aklepi. I really appreciate your time and your leadership, not just your interfaith work and for the Jewish community, but particularly engaging in this sort of dialogue. So we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks.